For the past few years, the entire country has completely lost its mind. Everyone suddenly became obsessed with cultivation. Ordinary people stayed at home mixing strange herbal drinks pretending to temper their bodies, while the truly unreliable ones all rushed into psychiatric hospitals to seek the Tao. And the place I ended up in, Beishan Psychiatric Hospital, just happens to be the biggest tajamar of so-called cultivation geniuses in the whole nation. And right now, I'm being forced into a ridiculous 5 stars facing the sky meditation pose, sitting cross-legged on my hospital bed, while my attending doctor stands in front of me with a mysterious expression and says, "Fellow Taoist Lee, this is a foundation establishment pill I recently refined. If you take it, your cultivation will surely advance by leaps and bounds, one step into a whole new realm." I just stared at him, completely speechless as he spouted that nonsense because, honestly, I'm not crazy at all. I just somehow got transmigrated here and got bound to a cultivation system. That's it. And as for why I ended up fighting a speeding truck on the highway, there's a reason for that too. The system literally forced me to do it. So I rolled my eyes at him and said, "Give me a break. Just look at that garbage of yours. It's not even as good as Old Wang's chive buns next door, and you expect me to swallow it? I think you've already gone crazy and came here looking for teammates to form a group." The doctor didn't respond, his brows twisting tightly together as he muttered, "Looks like ordinary pills won't suppress this. I'll have to increase the dosage." And before I could even argue back, I saw him grab a syringe and move toward me, making my heart jump as I quickly scrambled backward and shouted, "Don't come any closer. I'm warning you, this is drug abuse." But the moment I got up, 2 heavily tattooed orderlies rushed in and pinned me down instantly, and the needle pierced straight into my backside. My entire body went limp like it had no bones at all. Half an hour later, I was tied up like a rice dumpling on the bed, staring at the ceiling and reflecting on my life. Because half a year ago, I had just bound myself to this transmigration system and arrived here. And logically speaking, if nothing unexpected had happened, I should have already stepped onto the immortal path and eventually achieved eternal life. But clearly things didn't go the way they were supposed to. But the moment I absorbed the original body's memories, only one thought exploded inside my head. What the hell is this place? Where exactly have I been thrown into? Because this wasn't some cultivation world at all. It was a modern parallel world that had been invaded by these bizarre, rule-based horror instances, and every country would randomly select an unlucky person to enter these instances. Win, and you get rewards, lose, and you die. And the whole process is live-streamed for everyone to watch, but honestly, none of that really mattered to me. The only thing I cared about was whether cultivation was even possible in this world. So with that question, I immediately consulted the system, and of course, it acted all mysterious and high level, going silent for several days before finally replying, basically saying, "Yes, cultivation is definitely possible, just wait for your interview." And hearing that, I could only sigh because anyone who has ever walked the path of cultivation knows getting selected by an immortal sect as a disciple is never something that happens overnight. And somehow, I ended up being dragged into a psychiatric hospital like some kind of human furnace. After going through countless treatments that felt more like torture, I finally received a notification from what they called Sect Ding. You have been selected by the rule-based horror. Prepare to enter the instance. And at the same time, another message followed. You have been selected by the Film Shadow Immortal Sect. Prepare to depart for the sect. Meanwhile, as the horror live stream room opened, countless people flooded in from the very first second, voices overlapping in curiosity and concern. I wonder what this chosen one is like. Hopefully not like the last guy who died shortly after entering. And then, as the countdown hit 0, the previously chaotic live stream suddenly fell completely silent, everyone staring nervously at their screens. A few seconds later, a name appeared right in front of all of them. Chosen one of Tho Nation, Li Rui. And inside that so-called horror world, I had just finished scanning my surroundings when suddenly the system's voice echoed sharply inside my mind. "Welcome to the blood prison of slaughter. Your condition for clearance. Remain cautious and find a way to escape the ancestral prison." The system's voice echoed coldly in my head, and before I could even process it, it continued. "Since this is your first time entering a horror instance, a random talent draw is being conducted. Draw successful. Congratulations, you have obtained a ZG level talent." I barely had time to feel excited when suddenly a sharp alarm rang out in my mind. "Warning! System disorder detected. Congratulations, host. You have entered the Infinite Immortal Sect. Beginner mission. Cultivate diligently and become an inner disciple. Since this is your first time cultivating, a beginner reward is being issued. Issuance successful. Congratulations, you have obtained a mutated Mad Spirit root. The impermanent becomes constant, suffering transforms into joy, the self vanishes into oblivion, purity arises from non-purity. As I looked at the stream of system prompts flooding in, the corner of my mouth slowly curved into something almost inhuman. So this is it. I really am a once in 10,000 years cultivation genius. But from the perspective of the viewers in the live stream, my expression only made them panic even more. Is this really our country's chosen one? Why does he look kind of dumb? Look at that Dr. Ans from Haidong Nation, he looks way more reliable. Of course he does, he has an S-rank deduction talent. Quick, look, the rules just appeared. And right after that, the prison regulations unfolded before everyone's eyes. Rules of the blood slaughter prison. Rule 1. Inside the prison you have no name, only a number. Rule 2. Each cell houses 2 prisoners. If the number is incorrect, report immediately to the guards. Rule 3. Your cellmate is someone you can trust. Rule 4. Lights in the prison block will turn off at exactly 9 p.m. If after 9 p.m. the lights are still on, immediately beat your cellmate until the lights are completely off. Rule 5. After lights out, you must pretend to sleep for at least 1 hour. And during this time, it is strictly forbidden to open your eyes. Rule 6. Most of the time the corridor is dangerous, while the cell is safe, especially at 3 specific periods. Rule 7. Guards favor prisoners who are honest and obedient, so at no time should you attempt to deceive or oppose them. Rule 8. Always remember, guards wear gray uniforms, prisoners wear blue. If you encounter anyone wearing a different color, ignore them and immediately face the wall until they leave. Rule 9. All broadcasted commands within the prison must be obeyed unconditionally. As these rules appeared, even Dr. In's face turned serious as he muttered, "A rule set presented immediately upon entry? This has never happened before." The difficulty of this instance will definitely be extremely high. The condition for clearance is clear, escape the prison, but the method is still unknown. Meanwhile, inside this so-called rule-based horror world, I didn't even bother paying attention to those rules at all. I raised my head and looked at the prisoner lying on the top bunk. Then, without the slightest courtesy, I reached up and patted him, saying, "Dao friend, greetings." And as soon as he heard me, he slowly turned his head toward me with an unsettling, almost grotesque face that made me freeze for a brief moment before I forced a smile and said, "Your appearance is truly unique. To be assigned to the same cave dwelling as me, you must be a dragon among men as well. May I know your honorable name?" The moment those words left my mouth, his eyes sank into a dark, chilling gloom as he replied coldly, "I am number 513. What is your name?" I immediately cupped my fists toward him and said, "I am Li Rui." But the instant I finished speaking, prisoner 513 suddenly revealed a sinister smile, and in the next second, a strange, eerie force shot straight toward my heart, clearly intending to erase me completely. However, the moment that bizarre aura touched my skin, it reacted as if it had been electrocuted, trembling violently. And even my cellmate's twisted face flickered with a trace of shock. Right then, the system's voice rang out in my ears again. "A senior brother from the same sect has noticed your extraordinary talent and transmitted a strand of spiritual energy to you. With this spiritual energy, you have broken through the final barrier between mortal and immortal, successfully entering the Qi refining stage. Current realm. Qi refining, second layer." Instantly, I felt a warm current flow into my body, gathering deep within my dantian, and an overwhelming sense of clarity spread throughout me, making my entire body shudder uncontrollably as I thought, how is it this easy to reach the second layer of Qi refining? My luck is truly defying the heavens. I just entered the sect, and already a senior brother is passing down his cultivation to me. Where else could I even find logic like this? Without hesitation, I bowed respectfully to prisoner 513 and said, "Many thanks, senior brother, for this kindness. I will remember it deeply, and in the future, I will surely find a chance to repay you." Meanwhile, outside in the horror livestream of Tho Nation, the audience had completely lost their composure. The first rule clearly says there are no names in the prison, only numbers. He's literally asking to die. And at the same time, spies hidden within the live streams of other countries became ecstatic. Seeing that I had violated Rule 1 and yet remained unharmed, they immediately concluded that the first rule must be fake and quickly reported this information back to their respective authorities. And soon enough, the horror response headquarters of the Yinghua Empire made their decision, believing it was time to use their hint opportunity to inform their chosen one, convinced that with Tho Nation testing the waters ahead of them, their empire would surely claim victory once again. Meanwhile, their contestant, Lieutenant Gao Wanton, after receiving the tip from his country, immediately shouted toward the prisoner on the top bunk, "What's your name?" But the moment those words left his mouth, that same eerie attack surged toward him instantly, and in that life or death moment, his life-saving talent activated, dropping to his knees and begging for forgiveness, allowing him to narrowly avoid a fatal blow. Lieutenant Gao Wanton instantly dropped to his knees and began frantically kowtowing, his forehead slamming against the ground again and again. And the moment the audience of the Yinghua nation saw this humiliating scene, they immediately realized they had been played and stormed straight into Tho Nation's livestream, cursing wildly, "You despicable Tho Nation people, you're all going to die sooner or later." While the viewers from my country, although feeling a bit satisfied, couldn't help but feel confused. If Rule 1 wasn't fake, then how did I survive it? At that moment, the officials back home had already checked my records and discovered my condition: severe schizophrenia, someone who fantasizes about cultivating immortality every single day, and that alone gave them a massive headache because these horror rules were tied to the fate of the entire nation. Yet their chosen one was someone who didn't even bother reading the rules. They were completely helpless. Meanwhile, an hour had already passed since all the chosen ones entered the instance, and just as everyone was lying in their cells questioning life itself, the prison broadcast suddenly rang out. "All prisoners, leave your cells immediately. Under the guidance of the guards, proceed to the cafeteria in order. The sect has specially prepared delicious food for newly joined disciples. Please follow the law enforcement disciples to the dining hall in an orderly manner." The moment prisoner 513 heard this, he rushed out in a hurry, muttering in relief, "Finally, I can get away from that lunatic." Because to him, the reason things had gotten so strange was entirely due to my over-enthusiasm, constantly chasing him to discuss some so-called sect cultivation techniques. And worse, every time I got close, he could feel the eerie power inside his body leaking uncontrollably. Watching him run off, I quickly got up and chased after him, calling out, "Senior brother, don't delay, let's go eat together." Soon enough, we arrived at the prison cafeteria, where a notice was pasted on the door. Cafeteria rules. Rule 1, no talking while eating, maintain silence. Rule 2, wasting food is strictly prohibited. Rule 3, the only safe food is black sludge. If a pink meatball appears in your tray, throw it into the tray of the nearest prisoner. Just as the cafeteria doors slammed shut, nearly 20 guards assigned seats to all the prisoners and then stood along the aisles. And in the next moment, several prisoners in blue uniforms pushed out food carts. Seeing this, I couldn't help but swallow because I hadn't eaten anything since morning and had already been treated by those lunatic senior brothers. And although it felt strangely refreshing, hunger was still hunger. Right then, a tray of black sludge was roughly slammed in front of me, along with a pink meatball placed on top. Elsewhere, Gao Wanton stared at the bizarre food, cold sweat pouring down his face, his only life-saving trump card already used, no room for mistakes left, thinking, how the hell am I supposed to survive this? Then the broadcast rang again. All prisoners begin eating immediately, time limit 10 minutes. While at the same time, Yinghua's command center sprang into action, their commander pausing for a moment as he recalled being misled earlier, his face darkening as he ordered, "Go to other nations' live streams and gather complete intelligence within 5 minutes or all of you will disembowel yourselves." And as his subordinates rushed out, live stream screens began turning black one after another. Chosen of Nation ASAM eliminated, anomaly descending. Chosen of Maple Nation eliminated, anomaly descending. The elimination notices flooded in rapidly, deaths surpassing half and still climbing. And meanwhile, I casually picked up my tray and dumped all the black sludge into prisoner 513's tray beside me, smiling as I said, "Senior brother, this looks like a great tonic, perfect for you." And then, without hesitation, I swallowed the pink meatball in one gulp, causing the livestream chat to explode. What kind of brain does this Li Ru even have? Can't he read the rules? Wait, look carefully. He's completely fine after eating it. Inside the instance, I was still savoring the taste when suddenly, within just a few seconds, my bones began crackling loudly, my clothes tightening as my muscles expanded slightly, and just as everyone thought I was about to die, I suddenly stood up as realization hit me. I must have accidentally consumed a demon beast's inner core within the sect, gaining the bloodline of a demon king. Not only has my cultivation increased, but my physical strength has also improved significantly. Current realm: Chi refining, 3rd layer. I flexed my legs, enjoying the lingering taste and the changes in my body, And just as I was about to ask for another serving, a guard roared at me. "Prisoner 514, who allowed you to stand? Sit down immediately." But I remained where I was, unmoving. And seeing that, the guard revealed a sinister grin. "You brought this upon yourself. Rule 7. Guards favor obedient prisoners. Never resist or defy them." As he stepped toward me with a mocking laugh. And at that exact moment, the system notification appeared. "Ding. A law enforcement disciple within the sect has noticed your repeated opportunities and feels the heavens are unfair. Relying on his higher cultivation and background, he intends to suppress you. Host, proceed with caution." And as I looked at both the system prompt and the guard approaching me, a strange expression crossed my face. So he wants to suppress me while I'm still weak. If I endure this now, it will likely form a heart demon, and that could become a hidden danger during future breakthroughs or ascension. And just then, the guard raised his baton and swung it down at me, but without hesitation, I threw a punch straight at him. His head exploded instantly. The entire cafeteria froze, more than a dozen guards standing there in shock, because strangely enough, there didn't seem to be any rule forbidding prisoners from attacking guards, leaving them completely unsure how to respond. Seeing that, I awkwardly smiled and said, "Sorry, I used a bit too much force," while shaking my slightly numb right hand, thinking that since I even apologized, the sect probably wouldn't pursue this too seriously. Then I took a step back, shielding prisoner 513 behind me as I said, "Senior brother, this place isn't safe to stay. I'll hold them off. Go." But at that moment, the prison broadcast suddenly blared. "Prisoner 54 has used violence to kill a guard. Immediately send him to solitary confinement." And at the same time, the system prompt appeared before my eyes. "Ding. You have accidentally killed a law enforcement disciple. Your master orders you to proceed to Cliff X to repent." While elsewhere in the prison's basement level, a guard kicked Gao Wanton into a solitary confinement cell, his mental state already on the verge of collapse after being misled again. Others had copied Dr. Ain's method and died instantly, and Yinghua once again gave him incorrect guidance, ultimately getting him locked up. Muttering curses under his breath, he instinctively scanned his surroundings and noticed a mirror hanging on the iron door, with lines of blood-written text above it. Rule 1. Remember there are no mirrors in solitary confinement. If found, break it immediately. Rule 2. If the walls begin to bleed, go to the southeast corner of the cell, stand upside down, and shout your prisoner number. Rule 3. It is strictly forbidden to close your eyes in solitary confinement. Having been tricked twice by his own country, Gao Wanton finally decided to think for himself. But just as he was analyzing, a rain of blood suddenly poured down from above, seeping through the walls. His face turned pale as death. No time left to verify the rules, forcing him to act. He smashed the mirror instantly, then desperately searched for the southeast corner, but soon fell into despair. Where the hell even is southeast in this place? In panic, he stood upside down near the left side of the iron door and shouted out the shared number of all chosen ones. But in the very next second, a skinless face suddenly appeared right in front of him. Ding! Chosen of Yinghua Nation eliminated. Anomaly descending. And at the same time, I was directly thrown into solitary confinement by the guards. I curiously looked around the solitary cell, and almost immediately I noticed a mirror hanging behind the door. That single action alone made everyone back in my country tense up with excitement, thinking I had finally started paying attention to the rules, but before their relief could even last 2 seconds, I completely shattered their expectations. Because instead of reacting seriously, I stared at my reflection and couldn't help but think, whose outstanding junior is this to actually possess such immortal potential? Oh, turns out it's me. Well, that explains everything. I directly ignored the bloody rules written on the mirror and continued observing the surroundings, and the more I looked, the more this place felt filled with some kind of mysterious profundity. I was certain that the master I had never even met before sending me here to this so-called Cliff of Reflection must have had deeper intentions. There was no way it was just to punish me for killing a law enforcement disciple. After all, in cultivation, conflicts and fights are inevitable, casualties are normal, and any sect that clings to such trivial matters would just seem narrow-minded. Just then, the solitary cell suddenly began to rain blood, and the walls started oozing thick crimson liquid, and right at that moment, a system notification appeared before my eyes. Ding! Within a mysterious cave at the Cliff of Reflection, an unknown liquid is continuously seeping out. Driven by curiosity, you step forward to investigate and discover that it is actually body-tempering spiritual fluid. Such coincidence. It seems someone arranged this deliberately. And because I had ignored the rules, the blood on the walls escalated from slow seepage into violent gushing. But instead of panicking, I quickly stripped off my clothes and stuffed them tightly into the cracks of the door little by little, muttering to myself, what a waste of heavenly treasure. Luckily, I'm quick-witted. And only after the spiritual fluid stopped leaking out did the seriousness in my eyes finally fade, because something like body-tempering spiritual fluid should be soaked in like a bath. This kind of shower method really lacks elegance. Saying that, I stirred the liquid with my hand, scooping up a handful of herb-like strands that looked like hair and rubbed them over my body, completely immersed in the process. Meanwhile, back at the national headquarters, the technical staff stared at my footage, hesitating as they asked Commander Liu Guozheng whether they should send another hint, and for once, the usually decisive commander fell into hesitation, because each country only had 3 chances to send hints in this kind of instance, and earlier he had already wasted one out of fear that I wouldn't even read the rules. But now, I was clearly not normal, and after a long sigh he said, "These 3 chances. Li Rui might not even need a single one. Let's take a gamble. Maybe a miracle will happen. Send the information to him, and also bring his attending doctor here." While inside the instance as time passed, the blood in the solitary cell gradually stopped rising, and just then a buzzing sound rang in my head. Warning, system disorder, followed by a screen full of error codes flashing before my eyes. And just as I was wondering what was going on, the system spoke again. Ding. The specially refined body-tempering spiritual fluid has nourished your flesh, tendons, and bones. The spiritual energy within has further filled your dantian, greatly increasing your cultivation. However, due to the immense energy contained within, you are unable to fully refine it yet. Current realm. Qi refining. 5th layer. And at that moment, I suddenly opened my eyes, realization hitting me. So this must be my master's true intention in sending me here. He must have already seen my talent and personally designed this entire process for me. The spiritual fluid just now, and even the demon beast inner core from the cafeteria earlier. It must have all been arranged in advance. With such painstaking effort from my master, how could I afford to slack off? I silently made a vow to cultivate harder and become an inner disciple as soon as possible. And with that thought, I picked up the pile of clothes near the door and started putting them back on. But just as I pulled up my pants, something strange caught my eye. The reflection in the mirror flickered unnaturally. Curiosity pulled me closer as I leaned in to inspect it, but suddenly the mirror shattered on its own, and at the same time the iron door of the solitary cell burst open outward. Seeing such a bizarre scene, I didn't even bother questioning it and simply walked out. While behind me, whatever eerie presence lingered in that cell seemed to let out a sigh of relief as if a burden had been lifted. Night soon fell, and somewhere else, prisoner 513 curled his lips into a faint smile, thinking how peaceful it had been ever since that lunatic left. As the clock struck exactly 9 p.m., the lights in the prison went out on time, plunging everything into a deathly silence, and just as 513 was about to close his eyes to rest, a voice suddenly came from the lower bunk. "Good night, senior brother," making his body tremble uncontrollably as terror gripped him. The monster of a cellmate had actually come back. Wasn't it said that solitary confinement held 2 terrifying old beings? Meanwhile, in another cell, Dr. Akins from Haidang Nation lay on the lower bunk, carefully recalling the hints sent by his country, analyzing the situation of all chosen ones, and arriving at a bold conclusion. Every cell had a prisoner numbered 513, meaning this number might be the key to clearing the instance, and since 513 was still a prisoner, he must also follow the prison rules, and those who were attacked or eliminated likely violated Rule 3, that your cellmate is someone trustworthy. And it was precisely because he adhered to this that he survived a previous eerie attack. Just then, his cell door suddenly opened and he clearly felt something being placed inside, causing him to frantically recite exorcism chants in his mind, praying for holy light to drive away evil. And after a while, the cell returned to its suffocating silence, though he didn't dare relax as waves of foul stench and cold air crept up from behind him. And in my own cell, the situation wasn't much different, except my approach was far more intense and chaotic. I completely ignored Rule 5 about pretending to sleep and instead sat cross-legged on the bed. And not only that, I even stuck a sheet of A4 paper onto my forehead, while on the other side of that paper, a massive shadow occupied nearly half the room, crawling along the ceiling with a neck nearly a meter long hanging down, staring at me face to face. And the reason I was doing all this was simple. After absorbing so much body-tempering spiritual fluid earlier, I hadn't fully refined it yet, leaving my entire body so tense and overflowing with energy that I couldn't sleep at all, forcing me to move around inside the cell instead. At some point, I accidentally noticed that under the plank of the upper bunk, there was actually a torn piece of paper stuck there, and for the first time since entering this instance, I finally paid attention to the existence of these so-called rules. Curiosity took over as I reached out and peeled it off, and right then, the system's voice echoed in my mind. Ding! You have keenly discovered a clear mind talisman within the cave dwelling. This type of talisman is usually used to assist in breaking through bottlenecks or stabilizing one's Tao heart against inner demons. And looking at the paper filled with deep, incomprehensible characters, I immediately sat down cross-legged and stuck the talisman onto my forehead without hesitation. In the next moment, I suddenly felt the spiritual energy inside my body that hadn't been fully refined begin to move, and along with a series of increasingly rapid cracking sounds, the sensation grew stronger and stronger. I couldn't help but think, so I've already reached the level of understanding talismans without a teacher. Just as I was silently praising myself, believing I had used the correct method, another sharp crack rang out, and at the same time, the door of my cell was suddenly opened, followed by the system notification, ding. Within the sect, a Foundation establishment elder passed by your cave dwelling and sensed something unusual about the spiritual energy here. Using his divine sense, he discovered that you seem to be breaking through a bottleneck. Considering you are at such a critical moment, he has immediately used a unique technique to conceal your aura and is preparing to assist you without disturbing you. And just like that, more than half an hour passed. During that time, the captain of the guards came to inspect the cell and tried every possible method, but still couldn't remove the A4 paper stuck to my face. And as he continued using his eerie power to influence my emotions, not only did it fail, but he himself grew weaker and weaker. In the end, he shot me a resentful glare and decisively chose to retreat. Meanwhile, having just finished cultivating, I clasped my hands toward the empty air and said respectfully, "Many thanks, Elder." And the moment I said that, the large chunk of flesh on the guard captain's neck twisted slightly, as if he was about to explode in anger, but then he suddenly froze in place, because I had already fallen asleep from exhaustion long ago. Seeing that, he gave up on dealing with me any further, since nearly an hour had already passed since lights out, and in this blood slaughter prison everyone had rules to follow. Even him. Back in the livestream, the audience from my country couldn't stop laughing. That guard captain must be furious right now. What even is this relaxed mindset of Li Rue? What is going on inside his head? And just like that, morning arrived. Prisoner 513 on the upper bunk suddenly poked his head out and for the first time took the initiative to speak to me. "Dear cellmate, did you sleep well last night?" And facing his grotesque appearance, almost everyone would have given the same kind of polite response, not thinking there was anything unusual about such a question, and instead, many would even feel their confidence rise because of what seemed like a friendly gesture from 513. After all, anyone who had managed to survive until now had already, through various means, understood just how important this cellmate numbered 513 really was, and as long as they could maintain a good relationship with him, escaping alive didn't seem impossible. Meanwhile, I was suddenly awakened by the system's notification ringing in my head. Ding! After several hours of meditation, not only have you fully absorbed the remaining body-tempering spiritual fluid within your body, raising your cultivation once again, but you have also comprehended the technique used by the sect elder when he protected you. Current realm, chi refining, 6th layer. And the moment I heard that, a smile spread uncontrollably across my face as I eagerly opened the newly obtained technique. A line of small text appeared before my eyes. Shadow Step Technique. Beginner level. When activated, the body becomes like a candle flame in the wind, flickering and elusive, difficult to lock onto, and can randomly amplify a certain emotion to disturb the opponent's mind. Seeing this, I couldn't help but feel delighted. As expected of a Foundation establishment elder's technique, truly profound. I was just about to get up and share this joy with my senior brother, when the moment I opened my eyes, my brows suddenly furrowed because right in front of me appeared a dialogue box marked with a dragon symbol. At the same time, back at the national headquarters, the entire room had fallen into silence as everyone stared nervously at the screen, and after the last hint they sent me had been completely ignored, Liu Guozheng made a bold decision: to go insane along with me. He had gathered top psychiatrists from across the country, along with novelists and scriptwriters, all for one purpose: to craft a message that I would actually notice and understand. And finally, the moment I opened my eyes, they successfully sent a special hint filled with immortal aura. Fellow Taoist Li, this place is perilous. Traitors lurk within the order. If you wish to escape, you must act according to the plan. And as I read each line carefully, it looked like I was deep in thought, making everyone's faces light up with hope, thinking, finally, he's taking it seriously. This success was largely thanks to Dr. Zhao from Beishan Psychiatric Hospital. But just as they believed their treatment plan had worked and things were finally on track, my voice suddenly came out from the screen again. Interesting. In this coded message, they actually called me Fellow Taoist Li. That title instantly reminds me of an old acquaintance. And my words left everyone completely stunned, while my attending doctor, Zhao Wei, could only slap his forehead helplessly. Meanwhile, inside the horror world, after realizing the origin of this message, I fell into deep thought. Although Dr. Zhao's cultivation wasn't low, and he was always surrounded by a few white-clothed female spirits skilled in illusion techniques, with his strength alone, interfering with a proper sect like the Infinite Immortal sect should be impossible. Unless... A sharp glint flashed in my eyes as I glanced toward the upper bunk, a plan gradually forming in my mind. An hour later, as the prison broadcast rang out, the second day of the horror instance officially began, and unlike the first day, a new rule had been added. Rule 10, it is strictly forbidden to commit any act of violence against guards under any circumstances. And the moment this rule appeared, not only were the remaining chosen ones confused, but live stream chats across all countries exploded with speculation, no one able to figure out its true meaning. Could it be because someone had already attacked a guard and still remained unharmed? Such a possibility completely exceeded their understanding. But the viewers from my country only smiled without saying a word. After all, it was my actions alone that had forced the horror instance itself to add a new rule. And while the live stream buzzed with heated discussion, the surviving chosen ones had already begun making their next moves. After surviving the first day, the remaining chosen ones had already grasped most of the key precautions of this horror instance, and after confirming the general path to clearance, they all actively tried to build a good relationship with their cellmate, number 513, but during this entire time I acted completely differently because early one morning I suddenly leaned close to 513 and quietly said, "I already know," and after that I didn't interact with him at all for the rest of the day. And for him, that was nothing short of a blessing, as he even internally expressed, "I'm truly grateful to you for finally leaving me alone," because for the first time, he felt a sense of freedom and relaxation he had never experienced before. Time quickly passed, and soon it was 8:59 p.m. on the fourth day. The entire prison had already made preparations in advance. The guards confirmed that all cell doors were securely locked before quickly disappearing into the corridors, while all the prisoners waited patiently. And in that moment, the prison fell into absolute silence. Then, 9 o'clock arrived, and even with his eyes closed, 513 could still feel the light above shining through his eyelids. Just as expected, the lights hadn't turned off. Realizing this, the corner of his mouth curled slightly as Rule 4 surfaced in his mind. The lights must turn off at exactly 9 p.m. If after 9 p.m. they are still on, immediately beat your cellmate until they turn off. And under normal circumstances, this rule would clearly be disadvantageous to him, but not only did he not care, he almost wanted to laugh. Because he already knew this rule was fake, and honestly, anyone who thought about it carefully could figure that out. In a prison like this, where delays in lights out happened frequently for unknown reasons, if every prisoner followed Rule 4 strictly, the entire place would have descended into chaos long ago. So 513 boldly opened his eyes, knowing that the delay in lights out actually came with a hidden benefit, something he had carefully observed before, that tonight the guard captain wouldn't come for inspection, which also meant that prisoners didn't need to follow Rule 5 about pretending to sleep. This was undoubtedly good news. Of course, none of this hidden information was known to the chosen ones, most of whom, upon noticing the lights hadn't gone out, became extremely tense, worried that 513 might attack them because of it. But as time passed, nothing happened at all. Until suddenly, in the silent cells, a sharp click echoed, and after nearly an hour of delay, the lights finally went out. Having experienced Rule 5 the previous night, all the remaining chosen ones instinctively shut their eyes and began pretending to sleep. However, at that exact moment, from the upper bunk in every cell, the voice of prisoner 513 echoed out, "Do you want to escape from here, my dear cellmate?" And the moment those words were spoken, everyone's heart trembled, because from the current situation, 513 very likely held key information about escaping the prison. information that probably required certain conditions to be triggered. And some of the more daring and perceptive chosen ones, realizing this, felt like they had suddenly understood everything, their expressions turning almost feverish as they looked up at 513, while I, lying there, had already been waiting for this exact moment. Of course, my dear friend, do you have a way? Even though Dr. Ans from Haidang Nation still kept his eyes closed, the moment he heard 513's words, excitement surged uncontrollably in his heart. And after receiving that response, prisoner 513 fell silent for 2 short seconds before his voice echoed again. There is a way, but first, you need to open your eyes. And hearing that, Ans gathered all his courage and took the lead in opening his eyes. And when he saw that 513 was also looking at him, the tension in his chest eased slightly. It seemed he had gambled correctly. Then 513's voice came again, low and deliberate. My dear cellmate, you've made the right choice. Since you trust me so much, let's talk about how to escape this damned place. While on my side, I lay quietly on the bed with my eyes closed, as if resting, waiting for something. Because if there really was a way out of this prison, 513 definitely knew it. But he couldn't do it alone, which meant he needed another prisoner, someone who could be used at a critical moment under the pretext of escaping. And the best candidate for that role was obviously his own cellmate. Unfortunately for him, that cellmate was me, and in his eyes, I was nothing less than a terrifying lunatic, an extremely unreliable monster, which was why, even when the lights were delayed earlier, he didn't make a single move toward me. In fact, he had already decided that he would never reveal any escape-related information to me, planning instead to quietly wait for me to fall asleep before executing his backup plan. Time passed quickly, and soon an hour had gone by, and just as 513 decided to check whether I had fallen asleep, the moment he opened his eyes, he saw me lying at the edge of the bed, staring straight at him. His entire body froze instantly, and at the same time he felt the eerie power inside him not only becoming impossible to control, but also draining away at an alarming rate. I stared at him and let out a short, quiet laugh. Senior brother, at a time like this, are you still planning to hide things from me? Hearing that, a flicker of struggle flashed across his eyes. But when he remained silent, my patience started wearing thin as I slowly raised my hand and said coldly, Senior brother, you really can't. And in that instant, the image of me smashing a guard's head with a single slap flashed through his mind, causing him to instinctively scream, Wait! I'll talk! I'll tell you everything! And just like that, while prisoner 513 on my side was finally forced to reveal information, the chosen ones from other countries had already made their decisions much earlier. Every single one of them, without exception, chose to trust prisoner 513. And as for me, the reason I acted so differently all along traced back to that strange, secret message from this morning. After analyzing it carefully, I came to a conclusion. My identity had likely already aroused suspicion within the sect. After all, before entering the sect, I had indeed spent quite some time within the territory of the Beishan demonic sect. So that sudden message earlier was most likely a deliberate imitation of the writing style of that Beishan demon cultivator, meant specifically for me to see, because aside from subtly slandering my current sect, it also tried to push me to trust prisoner 513 unconditionally. And the purpose behind that was obvious: to test me. If I were truly a spy planted by the demonic sect, then after reading that message, I would definitely try to make contact with 513. And the moment I did, my identity would be exposed on the spot. But who do you think I am? It didn't take me long to see through the key point hidden in all of this. Originally, I planned to remain unchanged in the face of all changes, letting truth prove itself. After all, if I'm innocent, the sect would eventually clear their doubts about me. But maybe because I was currently under observation, not only did they stop providing me with excess beast meat, they even cut off access to body-tempering medicinal baths, causing my cultivation to stagnate, and for a moment, even my Tao heart began to waver. In the end, I had no choice but to change my approach. If I could resolve the issue of my identity sooner, then reaching the peak of chi refining would come faster, and that's why I gave that hint earlier. But the moment 513 started revealing his so-called escape plan to me, I suddenly realized something felt off. Things were developing in the exact opposite direction of what he intended. And at the same time, a system notification that only I could see confirmed my suspicion. Ding. The path of immortality is a struggle against the heavens. As you rise, your exceptional talent shines like the rising sun, unintentionally attracting the gaze of someone hidden in the shadows, clouding the mind of your senior brother with jealousy. He has secretly colluded with external enemies and intends to eliminate you. Host, proceed with caution. And as I read that, my gaze darkened instantly. So, my so-called senior brother had actually colluded with demonic prisoners. A storm of complex emotions surged within me. Meanwhile, 513 beside me was completely unaware of the gravity of the situation and kept talking, clearly confused, thinking, what nonsense is this guy even saying? What demon? What cultivation? Did I not explain it clearly enough? So he rolled his eyes and decided to explain it in a way I could understand. Let me put it this way. The forbidden area ahead is extremely dangerous. We must go together, but don't worry, junior brother. As long as I'm here, I can guarantee your safety. But before he could even finish, I suddenly lifted my head and said decisively, fine. If it's that dangerous, then I'll accompany you on this trip. Let's leave right now. And before he could even recover from his stunned expression, I grabbed him with one hand, dragged him off the bed, and rushed straight towards the cell door. Meanwhile, Dr. Ans was crouching behind his own 513, carefully moving forward step by step, and along the way, not only did they encounter no patrolling guards, but even the prisoners in the surrounding cells looked like corpses, lying motionless on their beds without even the sound of breathing. Just as Ans began to feel uneasy about this, 513 suddenly stopped, as if he had heard his thoughts, causing Ans to tense up immediately and ask, "What are you doing?" But unexpectedly, 513 simply turned his head and said calmly, "I forgot to tell you. After lights out until before dawn, unless something extremely unusual happens, the guards won't come to this block no matter what. So, my dear cellmate, before we officially enter the office area, you don't need to be so nervous." And after saying that, he even playfully winked at him. Seeing this attitude, Ains relaxed slightly, but his cautious nature still pushed him to ask about the reason, and in response, 513 gave a mysterious smile before answering directly, "Because in the corridor at night, there exists something far more terrifying than the guard captain." And hearing that, Ains didn't even have time to react before he saw 513 suddenly press his back tightly against the wall, standing perfectly straight. At that moment, Ains instantly recalled Rule 8. Guards wear gray, prisoners wear blue, and if you encounter anyone wearing a different color, ignore them and face the wall until they leave. Cursing under his breath, even though he couldn't see anyone wearing a different color, he immediately imitated 513 and pressed himself against the wall. But as more than 10 seconds passed, the corridor remained eerily silent. A sudden burst of laughter echoed through the corridor, making Dr. Ans flinch violently. And then 513's mocking voice followed, "My dear cellmate, you look absolutely ridiculous like that," instantly darkening Ans' expression as 513's lips curled into a strange, eerie smile. "If there was danger, I would have warned you in advance." And just like that, the two of them continued walking toward the end of the corridor, but this time, 513's expression turned tense as he pressed himself stiffly against the wall, and right behind him stood something that looked human, wearing a dark red uniform. Its pale face already corroded, devoid of any features, replaced only by a long, narrow slit like a surgical incision that kept opening and closing. The moment Ans saw this horrifying scene, his entire body froze, and with a sickening crack, the red-clothed shadow suddenly turned its head toward him. In sheer panic, he slammed his body tightly against the wall, and in the next instant, an icy chill mixed with a rotten stench swept over him from behind. Meanwhile, as that sinister aura grew slightly stronger, the corner of 513's mouth slowly lifted, and as he looked toward Ans, seeing that the red figure was now fully focused on its prey, his lips moved silently, as if whispering something before he turned and walked away without looking back. At that exact moment, a notification from his country appeared before Ans' eyes, informing him of the disastrous situation, while also relaying the words 513 had just mouthed, "Thank you for your trust, my dear cellmate." And at the same time, chosen ones from other nations began to fall one after another, betrayed by their own 513s. Some had struggled this far relying on talent and luck, only to be drained into dried husks by that red-clothed horror because they reacted just a second too late. And as those contestants were eliminated, the entire instance was left with only two survivors, me and Dr. Ans. But our situations couldn't have been more different. For Ans, the only way to survive now was to maintain that posture, pressed against the wall, completely motionless, until dawn, hoping the guards would eventually discover him and drag him away. No one knew what punishment awaited those who left their cells, but at least there was still a sliver of hope. Meanwhile, On my side, the moment I stepped out of the cell, I forced 513 to lead the way, silently activating my shadow step technique as I followed closely behind him. And seeing this, the trembling fear in his eyes was replaced by a cold glint as he said, "Fine then, junior brother. Just make sure you keep up." While back in my country's live stream, the atmosphere shifted slightly. Our Ruiji is finally getting serious now. As long as he follows 513, he should be able to clear this instance, right? Are you kidding? Every other country's chosen one got screwed over by 513. We should be warning him to be careful instead. And in fact, the moment other contestants started getting eliminated, Liu Guozheng had already sent me a warning. But just as expected, I ignored it completely. Now that all hint opportunities were used up, everything depended entirely on me. And inside the instance, as we got closer and closer to the corner of the corridor, 513 began glancing back at me intentionally. Because deep down, I already knew his original plan wasn't even this route. The only reason he changed it was because he couldn't deal with me. What he truly needed was a prisoner who thought he was clever but could be completely toyed with in the palm of his hand, not someone like me. Yet now, seeing me willingly follow him, I could feel that 513's mind was starting to drift back toward his original plan. And the reason he was so confident was simple. He had already prepared everything in advance. Even though he couldn't eat the pink meatball in the cafeteria, staying close to me for the past 2 days had already achieved a similar weakening effect. And on top of that, he hadn't slept for days, his body already hovering on the edge of collapse, faint traces of death energy beginning to seep out of him. And that red-clothed entity was extremely sensitive to life force, which meant the moment he encountered it, as long as he strictly followed the rules, he could practically guarantee a flawless escape. And as long as he didn't make too much noise, he could bypass the red shadow and head straight to the office area. He stepped past the corner of the corridor, even turning back to glance at me, and when he saw I was still tightly following behind him, excitement he couldn't hide slowly spread across his face, strange muffled laughter even slipping out unconsciously. But right at that moment, I suddenly shoved him hard. He instinctively turned around, and what he saw was my ice-cold expression. Yet before he could even process the shock, a flash of glaring crimson filled his vision. He panicked and slammed himself against the wall, still secretly celebrating that he had escaped death. But in the very next second, that red-clothed horror opened its long, serrated mouth toward him. And instantly, a terrifying force capable of draining the very soul erupted. Within a single breath, all life left 513's body completely. Watching this so-called senior brother meet the consequences of his own actions, I felt a faint trace of pity. But I knew this wasn't the time to hesitate, because the reason I followed him out in the first place was to eliminate the root of the problem. Senior brother is dead. So next, it's your turn, I muttered under my breath, then raised my head to face that red entity directly, a resolute determination exploding in my eyes as I shouted, "Farewell!" And before my words even faded, I turned and ran in the opposite direction. Because the system had already hinted earlier, this thing was a foundation establishment cultivator. And no matter how monstrous my talent was, I was still only at the 6th layer of chi refining. Crossing an entire major realm to kill it would be nothing but a delusion. But in the next instant, a violent force yanked me back. I could feel my life force draining rapidly, that suffocating brush with death tightening around me. But it lasted only a moment. Then suddenly, the system's clear voice rang out in my mind. Ding. You have encountered a rogue foundation establishment cultivator who infiltrated the sect. Despite exhausting all your methods, you were no match. However, at the brink of life and death, you achieved ultimate transcendence and broke your shackles. The devouring saint body, hidden within you, has now awakened. And the moment those words appeared, I felt the spiritual energy inside me boil violently. Instinctively looking inward, I saw a black vortex forming within my dantian, expanding at a visible speed. And then, the life force that had been draining from me began to flow back. Not just that, even that bone-chilling, sinister energy was being torn away from the red entity and dragged into my body at terrifying speed, refining into pure spiritual power. In an instant, the entire situation reversed. The red entity actually showed fear. It tried to escape, but it was already too late. Within just a few breaths, the corridor fell silent, leaving only me, and a strange lantern lying on the ground. The system's voice echoed again. Ding. You have devoured a Foundation Establishment cultivator. Your cultivation has increased significantly. Current realm. Peak chi refining. I stood there frozen for more than 10 seconds, a cold smile slowly creeping onto my lips. So this is all a Foundation Establishment cultivator amounts to. My gaze then dropped to the lantern on the ground. I picked it up and another system prompt appeared. Ding! Congratulations, host, you have obtained the magic artifact. Blood Fiend Soul-Seizing Lantern. It requires yin-attributed spiritual energy to activate. Under the glow of bloodlight, it can guide the path to the underworld, summon ghostly interference, and seize souls. Seeing this, I tried channeling my spiritual energy into it and gave it a gentle shake. Instantly, a strange, ghostly flame rose from within the lantern. It flickered a few times. Then, as if stirred by an invisible wind, tilted toward the direction of the office area behind me. I turned my head, staring at where the lantern was pointing, fell into brief thought, and then, with a subtle, calculating smile, I took a step forward, then another. On my way to the Cliff of Reflection earlier, I had almost wandered into this exact area. And back then, my master had urgently transmitted a message ordering me to retreat immediately. But now, I stood here waiting for quite a while, and the prison broadcast system remained completely silent. No warnings, no interference, and that was all I needed. Without hesitation, I activated my shadow step and rushed excitedly toward the office area. While outside, in my country's live stream, people were already losing their minds. So he actually knew the correct way to clear it all along? This is literally failing the method but getting the right result every time. And at the same time, high-ranking officials from various countries stared intensely at the screen. Even though most of their chosen ones had already been eliminated, and the anomaly had descended somewhere within their territories, they still wanted to see what other rules or horrors this instance contained, because every bit of information was invaluable. After all, there would always be a next time. The more they understood, the better they could support future candidates. Of course, not everyone was watching with good intentions. Some simply didn't want me to succeed. Officials from the Lighthouse Nation sneered coldly. A difficulty like this? Only our doctor could have cleared it. Our dominance will never be shaken. While the officials from Yinghua gritted their teeth in anger, that damn Li Rui, your country tricked us on purpose. Your chosen one will face consequences too. Don't even dream of surviving. But just as all these nations watched, some learning, some filled with resentment, what I encountered next completely exceeded everyone's expectations. The moment I stepped into the office area, the entire scene around me suddenly shifted. It no longer looked like a prison at all, but rather like an unfinished building in some remote suburb. There were no new rules, no ghosts, nothing. Just silence. Following the guidance of the Blood Fiend Soul-Seizing Lantern, I moved forward without encountering a single obstacle, until I finally arrived in front of a bright red wooden door. I raised my head, scanning my surroundings in confusion, trying to figure out where exactly this place belonged within the sect. But in the next second, boom! A deafening crash echoed as the ground beneath my feet suddenly collapsed into a square pit. And before I could react, my body fell straight down into the darkness. At the same time, a cold voice echoed in my mind, Ding! Due to your exceptional talent and your independent elimination of a rogue cultivator who infiltrated the sect, your actions have earned the sect master's approval. You were to be promoted early, however. On your way to the inner sect, you accidentally triggered a formation left behind by that rogue cultivator and have been transported to an unknown region outside the sect. Congratulations, host, you have completed the beginner mission and become an inner disciple. Rewards granted. Blood Fiend Soul-Seizing Lantern, High-Grade Foundation Establishment Pill. I didn't even have time to fully process the rewards when a blinding flash of blood-red light erupted around me, and in the next instant my consciousness went blank, completely severed from that bizarre and twisted world. About a minute later, inside the office area of the blood prison, which had been deathly silent until now, movement finally stirred. The bright red wooden door slowly creaked open, and a long neck stretched out cautiously. After confirming safety, the warden captain flung the door fully open. That prisoner. He's gone. And the moment the door opened, several guards in uniform stumbled out from inside, collapsing onto the ground. One of them struggled to his feet and hurriedly leaned toward the captain, while the captain himself spat on the ground, still visibly shaken. Damn it. That scared me to death. Good thing I reacted fast and used my authority to open an escape route beneath him. Otherwise, with strength strong enough to crush even the acting warden, if he had entered through that door, this entire prison would have been buried with him. He glanced back uneasily, still not fully reassured, and to make sure I could never return, he decisively pulled out the prison's drainage blueprint, erased the entrance location, and casually tossed it into the deep pit I had fallen into. At that very moment, even though I wasn't physically there, I could almost hear the thunderous announcements echoing across the outside world, spreading through live streams into the ears of countless people as a voice declared, "Congratulations to the chosen one of the Earth Nation, Li Rui, for successfully clearing this horror scenario. S-rank completion. Reward granted, Bronze Lantern of the Acting Warden. National Fortune of the Earth Nation +1. And somehow, despite being completely removed from that place, I could still feel that overwhelming shift in atmosphere, like the entire nation had gone from dead silence to absolute frenzy in an instant. And I knew the live stream chat must have been exploding with excitement as people shouted, "Li Rui did it! The Earth Nation has risen again." While even louder, exaggerated cheers flooded in. But on the other side, inside the Manhwa command center, the mood was the complete opposite because their commander had already dropped to his knees, his face twisted in fury as he roared toward the sky. "This is humiliation. The Earth Nation cannot be forgiven. I cannot accept this result." And before anyone could stop him, he pulled out his blade and stabbed it straight into his own abdomen, his voice turning hoarse as he screamed, "Li Rui, even as a ghost, I won't let you go." While at the same time, inside the Haidong Command Center, a man named Mike stared coldly at the glaring S-rank completion message on the screen, then glanced toward their own chosen one who was still standing stiffly facing the wall inside that terrifying corridor. His teeth grinding as he cursed, that damn Lee, he actually survived, and even got an S-rank. The Earth Nation is getting closer to us again." And one of his subordinates quickly tried to calm him down, saying, "Sir, we still have hope. Dr. Ains is still alive." But Mike immediately spat in disgust and snapped, "Don't mention that idiot to me. Giving him an SS-level talent was a complete waste. He might as well die in that nightmare." And the subordinate trembled as he replied, "But sir, if he dies, one of our cities will collapse." And those words finally forced Mike to calm down slightly, and after a few seconds of silence, he gritted his teeth and barked, "Then what are you standing around for? Use the reminder. Tell that idiot to get out of there now." But before anyone could act, the main screen in the command center suddenly went black, and a cold line of text appeared. "The chosen one of Haidong has been eliminated. The anomaly will descend shortly." And thinking back, it was obvious, Ains had already been crushed by fear, unable to endure even 2 hours of that suffocating tension, and in the end, just like the others, he was drained into nothing more than a dried husk. And with his failure, my country, the Earth Nation, became the only nation that didn't suffer a descent of horror in this entire scenario. And what surprised me even more was the surge of national fortune from the S-rank clear. Something I could almost feel gathering invisibly, because I later heard that people across the entire country experienced physical improvements, deadly illnesses vanished on their own, harvests increased abnormally, and even long-standing technological bottlenecks were suddenly broken through. And as for me, when I finally regained a faint trace of consciousness, I realized I had already been taken from Beishan Psychiatric Hospital by the authorities of the Earth Nation and placed under strict protection. And only later did I learn that Liu Guozhang, the man in charge of handling my situation, had been panicking the entire time, worried that someone like me, a high-risk, high-ability mental patient, would refuse to cooperate. But what he didn't expect was that the moment I left the horror scenario, I fell straight into a deep sleep. And no matter how many times the doctors examined me, they could only conclude that my brain's neural activity was abnormal while everything else remained perfectly fine. Yet no matter what methods they used, they simply couldn't wake me up. And that sleep lasted exactly 7 days until the cool-down period between scenarios finally ended, and suddenly that familiar pulling force struck again, and I could clearly feel myself being forcibly dragged into an entirely new horror scenario. And the moment it began, chosen ones from every country appeared in their respective live streams, chaotic voices in different languages overlapping everywhere, while I slowly became aware that countless gazes were now focused directly on me. And back in the Earth Nation's livestream, I could almost hear someone saying in confusion, "Is Li Rui still not awake? Why is he just lying there on the ground?" And immediately after that, a few malicious foreign comments reached my ears. And honestly, I didn't even need to open my eyes to know exactly who was trying to stir things up. I could almost hear the mocking voices echoing in my ears, saying, "How pitiful for the people of the Earth Nation. They still haven't realized their chosen one is clearly unconscious. This time it's going to be entertaining." But I didn't care. If anything, I knew they weren't entirely wrong, and honestly, it was a good thing the authorities never revealed that I had fallen into a deep sleep. Because even in that hazy state, I could faintly sense a wave of anxiety hidden somewhere in the darkness. Liu Guozheng and his team were probably panicking, running in circles with no way to reach me, because once a chosen one enters the strange tale, the outside world is left with only one option: limited reminders, and right now, before the strange tale had officially begun, even that single lifeline couldn't be used, so all they could do was hope I would wake up in time. And just as they were about to take the risk of using a forced awakening method on me, the spiritual energy inside my body finally completed its circulation, and in that instant I suddenly sat up, stretching my body as a series of cracking sounds echoed from my bones, a deep sense of relief washing over me as I let out a breath and muttered, "Finally." I broke through. All those days of seclusion weren't wasted. And right on cue, the system's voice rang clearly in my mind. "Ding! Congratulations, host, for successfully reaching Foundation establishment. You are now one step closer to the peak of the immortal path. Current realm, early Foundation establishment." And as I stared at the notification, just about to carefully feel the surging spiritual power inside me, two more messages appeared immediately after. One was a global announcement from the Strange Tale, and the other was a system mission. "Welcome to the Strange Tale. Snow Mountain Misfortune. Clearance condition. Complete the mountain climbing journey. Warning: difficulty level 4 stars. Number of national reminders reduced to 1, followed by ding. Congratulations, host, for discovering the ruins of the ancient immortal sect. Mission: fully explore the ruins. Hint: this is territory of the demonic sect. Please conceal your righteous identity to avoid unnecessary trouble." And the moment I read those words, demonic sect territory, ancient immortal ruins, my eyes sharpened instantly as I sat on the snow, a memory flashing through my mind. Back then, on my way to the inner sect, I had accidentally triggered a formation set by a demonic cultivator, and now that I thought about it, that very formation must have teleported me here, which made everything clear. If I hadn't killed that demonic cultivator back then, the one standing here right now wouldn't be me, it would have been him. Realizing that I had essentially taken his place and infiltrated a demonic team exploring a secret realm, I couldn't help but smile to myself, amused, because the irony was almost too perfect: a righteous cultivator like me sneaking into a group of demonic cultivators to explore ancient ruins. This was going to be interesting, but even so, I had no idea how strong these people really were, so I couldn't afford to be careless. And without hesitation, I suppressed my righteous aura completely and began mimicking the demeanor of a demonic cultivator, recalling everything I had observed before. I was just about to stand up and assess my surroundings when suddenly a slightly excited voice came from within the fog. "Hey, Xiaoli, come over here. Look what we found." I turned toward the sound and saw a middle-aged man in a red climbing jacket emerging from the mist, walking a few steps toward me, and I looked at him with a puzzled expression and asked, "Are you calling me?" He paused for a moment, clearly surprised by my response, but quickly switched to a concerned look and said, "Of course, Xiaoli, are you all right?" Seeing that he didn't react strangely after getting a clear look at my face, I immediately understood the situation and let out a small chuckle, replying, "Ah, I just slipped earlier. I'm fine, I'm fine. By the way, didn't you say you found something strange?" The moment I brought it up, he completely forgot his earlier confusion and became excited again, saying, "Yes, yes, come with me," before turning around and heading deeper into the fog. A faint, meaningful smile formed on my lips as I suppressed my aura even further and followed him. And after walking for about 20 meters, several figures came into view. And from their conversation, I quickly grasped their identities. The middle-aged man in the red jacket was Gao Jue, apparently the leader of this amateur climbing team, and besides him, there were 2 women and 1 man. One of the girls was named Yang Xinxin, and I noticed her eyes occasionally glancing toward me, while the other 2 were clearly a young couple deeply in love. The guy was Cheng Junhao, and the girl was Gong Xiaoru, and at that moment, all 4 of them were gathered excitedly around a wooden sign planted beside a narrow mountain path, as if they had discovered some earth-shattering secret, so absorbed that they didn't even notice me approaching at first. Meanwhile, the strange tale had officially begun, and the chosen ones from other countries had already started moving at the same time, most of them just like me. hesitating briefly after hearing their teammates call them before deciding to follow. And then the wooden sign by the mountain path came into clear view, with several warning lines written on it, the first one reading unmistakably: "Mountain climbing activities must be carried out during the daytime. If you fail to reach the mid-mountain rest station before sunset, bury yourself in the snow and wait for sunrise." The second rule on the warning sign read, "Always confirm whether your personal belongings are missing. If you discover something has been lost, you must retrieve it within 5 minutes." And the third rule followed immediately after: "The mountain path is extremely dangerous. Prepare thoroughly. Once the climb begins, abandoning the journey midway is strictly forbidden." And after reading the contents of the sign, the chosen one from Haidang, Soroin, revealed an obvious look of disappointment on his face. I glanced at his expression and faintly heard him mutter under his breath, "I thought a 4-star difficulty would actually be challenging. What a waste of the talent I pulled." And hearing that made my heart stir slightly, because this was Soroin's first time entering a horror scenario, which meant, according to the rules, he had received one chance to draw a random talent, and judging from the confidence on his face, that talent was definitely extraordinary. Later, I learned the truth. He had obtained the first SS rank talent ever seen, a power called Destiny. Just like its name implied, it allowed the goddess of fortune herself to favor him, greatly increasing the chances of beneficial events occurring while helping him avoid deadly disasters, sometimes even directly turning danger into safety itself. But the price for such a terrifying ability was equally severe, because once his accumulated luck was completely depleted, he would instantly be devoured by the anomaly. Looking back now, it was obvious that this talent was the reason he already believed victory was guaranteed, leaving him focused only on achieving a higher completion score. But as for me, my attention had long since been completely occupied by the system notifications continuously appearing inside my mind. Because the spiritual energy in this place was unbelievably dense and opportunities for cultivation had practically materialized into reality itself, my devouring saint body had actually begun operating on its own. Even with nothing more than natural breathing, my cultivation was slowly increasing. Cultivation +1, cultivation +1, cultivation +2. I stared at the endlessly flashing notifications in front of my eyes, my grin practically reaching my ears, as expected of the ruins of an ancient immortal sect. Even the spiritual energy at the outer perimeter was already this concentrated. If I could cultivate here for a long period of time, my strength would undoubtedly soar to unimaginable heights. Completely immersed in the joy of my cultivation increasing nonstop, I barely paid attention to the NPCs around me talking among themselves, only vaguely catching fragments of their conversation. One of them said excitedly, "This time it's all thanks to Brother Gao. If it weren't for you, even if we searched for years, we probably never would have found the route up the mountain." And that Brother Gao simply laughed modestly and replied, No, I just got lucky. But I've heard this mountain is extremely strange. Rumor says you can only climb it through this specific path, otherwise reaching the summit is completely impossible." Alright, stop wasting time already. The warning sign clearly said if we don't reach the midway station before sunset, we'll have to bury ourselves in the snow. After a gust of icy wind howled past us, everyone subconsciously began checking their equipment and personal belongings. Other than me, every single person eagerly crossed past the warning sign and started heading toward the mountain summit. And right then, a soft voice suddenly sounded beside me. I turned slightly and saw the young girl wearing a white down jacket almost identical to mine. Noticing that I was still standing there motionless, she had actually come back for me. She looked at me with concern and asked softly, "Senior brother, what's wrong? Are you feeling unwell somewhere?" And the instant her voice fell, another system notification exploded inside my head. Ding! A female cultivator from the Heiwan sect has mistaken you for her senior brother and has begun developing feelings for you. Host, please respond cautiously. I subconsciously wiped the drool forming at the corner of my mouth before slowly raising my head. Because the mountain slope tilted downward slightly, my line of sight landed perfectly on the raised design across her chest. I stared at her carefully for a few seconds before revealing an almost devilish smile and calmly saying, "You should call me senior brother instead." Instantly, the livestream chat from the Earth Nation exploded in madness. As expected of Brother Rui, he's acting again. This guy actually decoded the HH logo into Heiwan sect. That poor girl is completely doomed. Too bad she's just an NPC. And inside the horror scenario itself, the girl froze briefly after hearing my strange and completely random statement, But very quickly, she noticed the burning gaze lingering shamelessly across her chest, and her cheeks immediately turned bright red, as if she had suddenly misunderstood something important. Because to my surprise, she actually followed along with my words and replied obediently in a soft voice, "Good senior brother, let's go." And the moment she said that, I withdrew my gaze entirely, my expression instantly returning to its cold indifference as I walked past her with my hands behind my back, calmly heading up the mountain, while the girl herself seemed to remain completely immersed inside some strange fantasy of her own. When she finally snapped out of her daze, I had already walked quite a distance ahead. She hurriedly chased after me and called out anxiously, "Senior brother, wait for me." I slowed my pace a little, and not long after that, the two of us caught up with the group in front. The other three were still chatting and laughing as they climbed the mountain, completely unconcerned about why we had fallen behind. But after walking for about another half an incense stick of time, the scenery around the mountain path slowly began to change in unsettling ways. Earlier, the pine trees lining the road only felt gloomy, but now they looked twisted and unnatural, their crooked branches stretching across the path like countless withered hands trying to grab passing travelers. And that wasn't even the worst part. The higher we climbed, the thicker the fog became, reducing our visibility more and more until the world around us felt suffocatingly narrow. Then, scattered along both sides of the mountain road, human-shaped ice statues started appearing one after another. When I got closer and looked carefully, my eyes narrowed slightly, because the expressions and postures of those frozen figures looked far too realistic, as if living people had been sealed alive inside the ice on the spot. But strangely enough, the NPCs around me showed absolutely no reaction to such a horrifying scene. In fact, whenever they passed by the ice statues, they even joked around casually as if nothing was wrong at all. Seeing such abnormal behavior would have made any chosen one from the other countries feel their scalp go numb. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed the chosen one from Han Nation, Kim Jin-gu, standing not far away with an extremely pale face. His lips trembled as he muttered to himself, "Damn it. Judging from the direction and posture of these people, they all froze to death while trying to go back down the mountain." He paused for a moment, and even his voice started shaking. Then that third warning on the sign at the foot of the mountain was real. The consequence of giving up midway is ending up like this. I could see the fear in his eyes clearly. He quickly looked away and tried hard to calm himself down. It was obvious he had entered this horror scenario determined to clear it, staying alert from the very beginning. But the pressure of a 4-star scenario had already exceeded his expectations. Watching other people clear scenarios through live streams was one thing, but personally stepping into this nightmare was completely different. Only now did he truly understand that suffocating feeling of helplessness and despair. And the abnormal behavior of the NPCs only amplified that fear even more. Kim Jin-gu slapped his own face a few times and whispered to himself, "Don't panic. I'm a man of Han Nation, and the random talent I pulled is really strong." After saying that, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a pack of cigarettes, clearly planning to use nicotine to calm his nerves, but after searching through all his pockets, he suddenly froze. "Damn it! How is this possible? I literally used my lighter to light a cigarette back at the foot of the mountain. So how did it disappear now?" Before he could even finish speaking, his face instantly turned deathly pale because he had obviously remembered something far more terrifying. The second warning written on the sign at the foot of the mountain surfaced in his mind once again. Always confirm whether your personal belongings are missing. If you discover something is lost, you must retrieve it within 5 minutes. At that moment, the rule matched Kim Jin-gu's situation perfectly. Panic exploded deep inside his eyes as he desperately tried to remember when exactly he had lost his lighter. If he hadn't suddenly wanted to smoke just now, then a little more time passing might have killed him before he even realized it. Of course, there was still a possibility that the rule itself was fake. But Kim Jin-gu didn't dare gamble on that possibility at all. Deep down, he had already completely accepted the rule as real. Still, he wasn't entirely consumed by panic yet. From his perspective, if the item had truly been missing for over 5 minutes already, then some kind of abnormal change should have happened by now. Whether that change affected himself or someone else didn't matter, but at least everything around him still appeared calm for the moment, and that meant there was probably still a chance to fix things. Thinking of that, Kim Jin-gu stopped hesitating and decisively activated the ability from the random talent he had obtained after entering the scenario. The effect of his talent was terrifyingly powerful. At any moment, he could mark one real rule inside the horror scenario and directly turn that rule into a fake one, and he could use this ability a total of 3 times. This time, the rule he targeted was the very one he had violated. A flash of light swept across Kim Jin-goo's vision, and immediately afterward, he felt something inside the entire scenario shift ever so slightly. He couldn't explain that strange sensation with words, but he was absolutely certain that the world around him had changed, and reality quickly proved that his decision had been correct. Because other chosen ones from different countries also encountered the same situation, except they weren't lucky enough to possess an ability like his. After failing to recover their lost belongings in time, their live stream screens instantly turned black one after another. The chosen one of Kangaroo Nation has been eliminated. The chosen one of Frost Nation has been eliminated. Several elimination notifications appeared one after another, but then suddenly stopped, and the viewers watching their own country's live streams instantly let out relieved sighs. At the same time, everyone realized something terrifying. Losing personal belongings seemed to be an unavoidable event inside this horror scenario, but it didn't necessarily have to happen to the chosen ones themselves. For example, Soren from Lighthouse Nation was currently standing by the roadside with a smug expression, watching one of the NPCs frantically searching for a missing item, yet he showed absolutely no intention of helping at all. Meanwhile, Lakuli from Atam Nation behaved far more politely on the surface, actively comforting the female teammate who had lost something, but hidden deep inside his eyes was a burning lust, and every now and then his gaze would drift toward the more revealing curves of her body. As for my side, the one who encountered trouble was Zhang Xin, the girl who had shown obvious interest in me earlier. Still, after everyone searched for quite a while without finding anything, and considering they had to reach the midway rest station before nightfall, the group had no choice but to give up searching and continue climbing the mountain. As time slowly passed, the sky gradually darkened, and after several exhausting hours of climbing, our amateur mountaineering team finally reached the mountainside with almost all of our stamina drained dry. Gao Jue, the team leader, panted heavily as he raised a hand above his brows and scanned the distance for a long time before suddenly pointing somewhere ahead. I think I can vaguely see the outline of the rest station over there. Hurry up! The moment he finished speaking, he immediately started heading in that direction. Chung Junhao and Gong Xiaoru, the young couple glued to each other the entire time, quickly followed behind him. Then beside me, Zhang Xingxin suddenly let out a horrifying laugh that made the atmosphere around us instantly colder. Senior brother, let's go over there too. Hearing that, I slowly glanced toward her. Her face was deathly pale. The left corner of her mouth twisted upward unnaturally, and her entire body radiated an indescribably eerie feeling. But I didn't react to her abnormal state at all. I simply stared at her calmly and asked, Junior sister, what exactly are you laughing at? Zhang Xinxin subconsciously opened her mouth as if she wanted to answer me, but before she could speak, Gao Jue suddenly turned around helplessly and shouted toward us, Seriously, you two? The rest station is right ahead already. You can flirt after we get inside, all right? Aren't you freezing standing there? Hurry up and get over here. The moment she heard that, Zhang Xinxin seemed to suddenly snap back to her senses. Her strange expression vanished instantly, returning completely to normal. Blushing deeply, she answered softly before quickly running toward the rest station first. Watching her disappearing figure, I helplessly shook my head and was just about to follow when the system notification, which hadn't appeared in a long time, suddenly popped up again in my mind. Ding! Heaven never disappoints those who persist. After fully exploring the outer region of the ancient immortal sect ruins, you have finally discovered a hidden immortal tomb buried within the mountain ridge. The words immortal tomb made my eyes light up instantly. Honestly, although my cultivation had been steadily increasing this entire journey, that tiny amount of progress was basically insignificant to a foundation establishment cultivator like me. What annoyed me even more was that in order to avoid exposing my identity, I occasionally had to flirt back and forth with that mentally unstable female demonic cultivator from the Hehuan sect. This kind of thing simply wasn't suitable for a naturally gifted immortal cultivator like myself. But thankfully, just as my patience was beginning to wear thin, the turning point I had been waiting for finally arrived. I instinctively believed that entering the tomb would greatly improve my fate and opportunities, so without even realizing it, I sped up my footsteps. Meanwhile, Soren from Lighthouse Nation had already moved ahead of everyone else and pushed open the door to the midway rest station first. From the outside, the place looked like nothing more than an ordinary wooden cabin, but the moment he stepped inside, he realized the interior was nothing like its appearance. Not only was the entire place filthy and chaotic, but the air was constantly filled with the disgusting smell of mold and decay. Soren frowned as he walked toward one of the bedrooms deeper inside the cabin. Compared to the living area, this room looked slightly better. At the very least, there was a single bed that could barely be used for resting. But then something suddenly caught his attention. He walked toward the bed and noticed that beneath a torn pillow, something appeared to be hidden. Possessing an SS rank luck talent, Sauron had absolutely no intention of acting cautiously. He directly kicked the pillow aside, and immediately a piece of paper slid into view. Written across it were the words, Midway Rest Station Maintenance Rules. Rule 1. Ensure that the kerosene lamps inside the station always remain lit. Rule 2. When snowfall begins, ensure that you remain indoors. Rule 3. The Midway Rest Station is open to everyone. If you encounter other climbers in trouble, do not hesitate to help them. Rule 4. Any sounds heard inside the station during the night are normal phenomena. Do not pay attention to them. Rule 5. Night watch duty is mandatory. At least 2 people must stand watch together. Rule 6. While inside the station, always observe the condition of your companion's pupils. If you discover abnormalities, kill that person immediately. Rule 7. Remember, never breathe onto the windows inside the station. The instant Sauron finished reading the new rules, a trace of seriousness finally appeared on his face for the first time. Looks like this horror scenario is only truly starting now. But honestly, that's better. Otherwise, this would have been too boring. Right after saying that, he folded up the station rules, stored them away, and turned around to leave the room. At that moment, the rest of the team had already entered the Midway Rest Station as well. Honestly, the place really was terrible. Even Gao Jue, the team leader, looked slightly embarrassed after stepping inside. But despite that, he clearly had no intention of leaving. On the contrary, another female NPC in the group, Gong Xiaoru, had completely lost the excitement she showed earlier. Her face was filled with disgust as she tugged lightly on Chung Junhao's sleeve and complained, "Honey, how about we find another place instead? Just look at this place. It's so filthy. How are we supposed to stay here for the night?" But before she could even finish speaking, she was immediately interrupted by Gao Jue's fierce objection. The man who had acted warm and friendly this entire time suddenly became unusually serious. "Absolutely not. It's already getting dark. There's no way we can find another place to stay tonight in such a short time. We must stay here tonight." His sudden outburst clearly frightened Gong Xiaoru. She instinctively shrank her neck back and looked toward Chung Junhao with pleading eyes, hoping her boyfriend would support her, but unexpectedly even he seemed to agree with Gao Jue's opinion. He merely patted the back of her hand gently without saying another word. All of this happened right in front of Sauron, who had just walked out from the bedroom. Normally, he wouldn't care at all whether these NPCs lived or died, much less bother thinking about their opinions, but things were different now. The appearance of the second set of rules had finally made him start taking this horror scenario seriously. Because of that, not only did he need to ensure his own safe clearance, but he also had to prevent these NPCs from becoming burdens that might drag him down later. Carrying a deliberately friendly smile, Sauron walked over toward the group and said calmly, "I also agree that we should stay here, because I found this." As he spoke, he handed over the rest station rules in his hand. At the same time, almost every chosen one from every country had already encountered this second set of rules as well, and nearly all of them opposed leaving the station whenever someone suggested it. There was no complicated reason behind it. They were simply terrified of violating the rules and triggering something horrible, even if the consequences didn't happen directly to themselves. But my own situation was completely different from everyone else's. After arriving in front of the wooden cabin, I didn't rush inside immediately. Instead, I casually looked around in every direction, carefully observing the surroundings. My strange behavior made the others feel slightly confused, but none of them questioned me too much. Then, after I confirmed that every single person had already entered the station, a sly glint quietly flashed through my eyes. After all, opportunities that belong to others eventually become mine. In my mind, this place was obviously some ancient immortal tomb. Who knew what kind of dangers, traps, or forbidden mechanisms were hidden inside? If I recklessly walked in first and triggered something fatal, wouldn't that just be asking for death? Rather than taking unnecessary risks myself, it would be much smarter to let someone else scout out the situation first. As for me, I could simply follow behind afterward and reap the benefits later. While I was still silently calculating everyone's strength, a sudden argument broke out inside the wooden lodge, and the moment I heard the noise, my eyes sharpened instantly. So fast, they're already fighting among themselves? I couldn't help sneering inwardly. As expected of demonic cultivators, thinking the timing was finally perfect, I decisively activated my shadow step technique, my figure flashing forward like a ghost as I slipped into the lodge in an instant. But the moment I entered, just as I was preparing to sit back and watch the tigers tear each other apart, I realized the situation was completely different from what I expected. Nobody was fighting at all. Instead, everyone inside was gathered together, staring intensely at something in silence. Hearing me enter, Gao Jue was the first to turn around, and after realizing it was me, he immediately waved me over and said, "Little Li, come take a look at this." As he spoke, he directly handed over the strange piece of paper in his hand. And at that exact moment, the system notification suddenly rang out inside my mind. Ding! The demonic cultivators within your team seem to have discovered a relic hidden inside the ancient tomb. However, due to their limited cultivation, they are unable to comprehend the mysteries within it. Therefore, they have decided to offer this item to you in hopes of forming a good karmic connection. The moment I saw the system message, the killing intent hidden deep within my eyes faded slightly, and I coldly snorted inwardly. At least these people know their place. On the surface, though, I showed no emotion at all and calmly stepped forward to accept the strange paper. But contrary to my expectations, the system gave no additional explanation afterward. That immediately made me frown a little. Even with my foundation establishment cultivation, I still couldn't easily understand the secrets hidden within this thing. Clearly, this item was far from ordinary. I carefully examined it over and over again for a long time, but after confirming I still couldn't make sense of it for now, I could only put it away temporarily. By then, the sky outside had already become completely dark, and snowflakes had started drifting quietly down from above. Because of various reasons, Gong Xiaoru and Cheng Junhao ultimately didn't dare leave after all, and the two of them reluctantly decided to spend the night inside this mountain rest station. Even though the station rules were written clearly, the NPCs barely seemed to care after reading them. Nobody arranged proper night watch duty at all. Instead, everyone hurried to settle down and rest. The first half of the night passed strangely peacefully. Inside the lodge, aside from the steady sounds of snoring, only occasional faint whispers could be heard drifting through the darkness. Very quickly, midnight arrived, and suddenly an enormous crashing sound exploded through the station, instantly jolting everyone awake. Almost everyone's first reaction was to look toward the front door, but unlike them, I slowly opened my eyes and directed my gaze straight toward the inner bedroom instead. Then another loud bang echoed out, and this time everyone finally realized where the sound had come from. It was definitely the bedroom. Gao Jue immediately stood up from the floor and swept his eyes around the room. After confirming that everyone was still gathered in the living area, fear rarely appeared inside his eyes. After all, he was the one who first discovered this place, so he knew better than anyone that the bedroom contained nothing except a broken single bed and the station maintenance rules. Yet the sound just now had clearly come from inside there. I watched as Gao Jue took a deep breath before exchanging glances with both me and Cheng Junhao. Then he spoke in a low voice. "If we don't figure this out tonight, nobody's going to sleep peacefully. There could be some unknown danger hiding in there. Let's go check it out." Hearing that, Cheng Junhao nodded seriously, and the two of them immediately grabbed whatever objects nearby could be used as weapons before nervously walking toward the bedroom, completely ignoring me in the process. But just as they reached the bedroom entrance, Gao Jue suddenly raised his hand, preparing to count down before opening the door. However, before he could even start, I had already moved. Without hesitation, I lifted my leg and slammed a powerful kick directly into the bedroom door, causing it to explode open violently as it crashed hard against the wall. Standing outside the bedroom door, Gao Jue and Cheng Junhao were completely dumbfounded. The two of them stared at each other, then turned to look at me sitting cross-legged, not far away as if nothing had happened. And after standing there awkwardly for a long moment, they finally gathered their courage and cautiously squeezed into the bedroom. By then, Gong Xiaoru and Jiang Xinxian had also forced themselves to move closer. Gong Xiaoru's voice was trembling badly as she nervously asked, "Honey, do you need help?" But the instant her words fell, another heavy crashing sound suddenly exploded from inside the room, making everyone there shudder instinctively at the same time. This time, we could finally confirm without a doubt that the sound was definitely coming from inside the bedroom itself. Gao Jue gritted his teeth and dragged the broken single bed away, and immediately a locked trapdoor hidden beneath the floorboards appeared right before our eyes. His expression instantly darkened as he said in a low voice, "The sound must be coming from underneath here." Gong Xiaoru swallowed nervously before whispering, "Then, should we open it and take a look?" But right then, a strange hoarse voice suddenly echoed through the room. I slowly raised my eyes only to see everyone frozen in confusion as they turned around trying to find the source of the voice, and several seconds later, all of them finally locked onto Jiang Xinqin standing near the doorway. That voice had actually come from her. I slowly opened my eyes fully and fixed my gaze onto her body, and the moment I did, my heart tightened slightly. That same bizarre, fragmented feeling had appeared around her again, as though space itself had been torn open around her body. But what was even stranger was her pupils. They were completely different from before. Deep inside them, faint snowflake patterns could actually be seen flickering in and out, creating an indescribably eerie feeling. At the same time, it wasn't just me. Chosen ones in other countries seemed to be encountering similar situations as well. Over in ATAM country's scenario, one of the team members had suddenly undergone a terrifying personality change too, leaving the surrounding NPCs frozen stiff in place. Meanwhile, Jiang Xinqin's face became paler and paler, yet her voice carried an almost seductive magical charm as she softly asked, "What's wrong? Aren't you all curious about what's hidden inside?" I immediately noticed Gao Jue and Chung Junhao's eyes beginning to lose focus, clearly bewitched by her voice, as they subconsciously started agreeing with her words. But in the very next second, Gong Xiaoru suddenly stepped directly in front of Chung Junhao, glaring at Jiang Xinqin with obvious hostility while tightly grabbing onto Chung Junhao's arm. I couldn't help narrowing my eyes in confusion. Somehow, Gong Xiaoru hadn't been affected at all. The sudden pain from her grip instantly snapped Chung Junhao awake, making him shiver violently as clarity returned to his eyes. Gao Jue also regained his senses shortly afterward and hurriedly agreed, "I think it's better not to cause extra trouble either. Besides, we don't even have tools to open the lock. Let's just leave it alone." I clearly caught a flash of vicious malice flickering deep within Jiang Xinqin's eyes for a split second, obviously because she hadn't expected her plan to fail, but immediately afterward, it was as if she suddenly sensed something. She abruptly turned her head toward Rakuli from Atam country, who had been staring at her the entire time with burning desire in his eyes. Jiang Xinxin froze briefly, then instantly returned to that weak and fragile appearance that looked as though a gust of wind could knock her over at any moment. Jiang Xinxin's voice carried 3 parts grievance and 7 parts pitiful sorrow as she softly said, "I was just curious, that's all. If everyone thinks it'll bring trouble, then forget it." After saying that, she pretended to look depressed and slowly walked over to Rakuli before sitting down beside him. About half an hour later, Gao Ju and the others had already shut the bedroom door once again, and everyone returned to their own spots to rest. Before long, soft snoring gradually filled the mountain lodge once more. But Rakuli, who had clearly been suppressing himself this whole time, finally couldn't hold back anymore. He slowly moved closer to Jiang Xinqin and started trying to flirt with her. And not long after, his hands even began reaching toward her body. But just as he was about to get what he wanted, Jiang Xinqin suddenly stood up and walked straight toward the bedroom. Rakuli grabbed at empty air, frustration instantly filling his face, but when he raised his head, he saw Jiang Xinqin pushing the bedroom door open while giving him a seductive look and crooking her finger at him. In that instant, Rakuli's eyes turned red with desire. Lust had completely clouded his mind, and he had long since forgotten that he was still trapped inside a horror scenario. Letting out a low growl, he rushed toward her in huge strides. Even without seeing it, I could already imagine the excitement exploding inside ATAM country's livestream chat. But in the very next second, every livestream screen suddenly went black at the same time, and a blood-red system notification appeared across the top. ATAM country's chosen one has been eliminated. The anomaly will descend shortly. Meanwhile, inside Thoquok's horror response headquarters, the intelligence department rapidly summarized the cause of Rakuli's death and urgently sent the report to Commander Liu Guozheng. Even though I wasn't physically there, I could practically picture the shock on his face as he read the report. Manipulated into opening the hidden trapdoor. Attacked and killed by an unknown anomaly. Liu Guozheng slowly raised his head toward the large monitor, where I was still shown sitting cross-legged in the corner, meditating calmly while Jiang Xinqin appeared completely normal on the surface. He probably let out a relieved sigh before muttering, "Looks like our only reminder opportunity still doesn't need to be used yet." But before he could finish speaking, the image on the screen suddenly changed. Jiang Xinqin slowly approached me, her voice as soft as feathers as she whispered, "Senior brother, I can't sleep." A faint fragrance drifted into my nose, making me subconsciously frown before blurting out coldly, If you can't sleep, what does that have to do with me? Zhang Xingqin's gentle expression instantly froze solid, and the corners of her eyes twitched uncontrollably several times. For a moment, the atmosphere became awkward beyond belief, but she clearly had no intention of giving up. Very quickly, she adjusted her expression again and pretended to look wronged as she softly said, "Senior brother, you've changed. You're not like before anymore." The moment those words left her mouth, the system notification immediately rang out inside my head again. Ding! Although you have tried your best to conceal your righteous path identity, under careful observation you have still revealed flaws. The female cultivator of the Heiwan sect has become suspicious of you. Host, please respond carefully. Hearing that, I suddenly lifted my head and instantly concealed all traces of impatience, even softening my tone slightly as I asked with deliberate curiosity, "Oh? Is that so? Then tell me, what exactly has changed?" A trace of smug satisfaction flashed quickly through Zhang Xingxin's eyes before she pouted lightly and said, "Anyway, you're just not the same anymore. I'm too lazy to care about you." After saying that, she stood up and deliberately swayed her hips exaggeratedly while walking straight toward the bedroom again. Watching her back disappear into the darkness, a cold smile slowly curled across my lips. "Good," I sneered inwardly. "That saves me a lot of trouble." I carefully glanced around the room, confirming that Gaoju and the other three were still sleeping deeply without noticing anything, and then silently drew out my blood-fiend, soul-seizing banner. Under the dim oil lamplight, my figure flickered between existence and shadow as I noiselessly followed her into the bedroom. The moment Zhang Xingqian entered the room, the pitiful expression on her face vanished completely, replaced by a sinister smile. I stopped at the doorway and softly called out, "Junior sister, I'm coming in." Hearing my voice, Zhang Xingqian regained her composure and shot me a seductive glare. "Get lost. I don't need you worrying about me." Yet despite saying that, she clearly had no intention of actually driving me away. Instead, she casually brushed a strand of hair aside and slowly walked toward the single bed. I quietly shut the bedroom door behind me, completely sealing off the outside light, and in an instant, the room sank into suffocating darkness so thick it felt impossible to disperse. Zhang Xingxin's slightly magnetic voice echoed through the darkness, filled with deliberate temptation. "Senior brother, do you like me?" I didn't answer. I simply stood silently in place, sensing every movement she made. Zhang Xingxin also seemed unconcerned by my silence as she lifted her eyes toward me and whispered, "Senior brother, if you can catch me, then I'll let you do whatever you want." As she spoke, she slowly crouched down while reaching her hand toward the lock on the hidden trapdoor beneath the floor. Seeing that, I immediately sneered inwardly. So that was her plan. She intended to deliberately make noise and lure me into rushing over, then open the trapdoor and dodge aside so the thing sealed underneath would treat me as its target instead. The cold smile on Zhang Xinxin's face widened further as she glanced toward the spot where I stood hidden in darkness. At that moment, I looked no different from a shadow blending into the room itself. Then suddenly, something bizarre happened. The lock that even Gao Zhu and Cheng Junhao, two grown men, had been unable to open earlier, unexpectedly fell apart by itself in Zhang Xinxin's hand. "Senior brother, hurry and come catch me," she whispered sweetly before violently yanking the trapdoor open. In the next instant, a terrifying gust of wind exploded upward from beneath alongside a deep, monstrous growl. But at the exact critical moment between life and death, my figure suddenly moved, instantly vanishing into concealment. Having lost its target, the creature froze in place for a brief second. The bedroom itself was extremely cramped, and after missing me, it suddenly seemed to catch another scent nearby before violently turning around and charging directly toward Zhang Xinxin behind it. In that instant, a disgusting stench and bone-piercing cold flooded the entire room. I clearly heard the sound of Zhang Xinxin being smashed violently onto the ground by an overwhelming force. At the same time, the system notification rang out once more. "Ding! The female cultivator of the Heiwan sect discovered your righteous path identity and released the corpse puppet leaders sealed within the tomb in an attempt to kill you. However, during the critical moment, you successfully resolved the danger and caused her to suffer the consequences of her own actions." I swept my eyes over the system prompt in my mind, and immediately afterward, I activated my spiritual energy. The moment the blood-fiend, soul-locking lantern in my hand suddenly burst into a crimson glow, the thick darkness inside the bedroom was instantly torn apart by eerie red light, and only then did the horrifying scene become completely visible before my eyes. That corpse puppet, with its deathly pale skin and twisted human shape, was crouched directly on top of Jang Hun Hun, its entire body trembling violently while disgusting chewing sounds echoed non-stop throughout the sealed room, the kind of sound that made even my scalp go numb. I looked toward Jang Hun Hun lying crumpled in the corner, and what shocked me was that she clearly hadn't died yet, but despite being torn apart alive, not a single scream escaped her mouth. Instead, the corners of her lips slowly curled upward into that same bizarre smile as she stared straight at me with eyes filled with madness and whispered softly, "I'll be waiting for you." And the very next second, the corpse puppet swallowed her whole in one bite. Watching her meet such a miserable end after trying to scheme against me, I couldn't help letting out a faint sigh. But unexpectedly, that tiny sound immediately exposed my presence. The corpse puppet suddenly tilted its head toward me and released a low growl, its posture tightening as if it would pounce at any second. But right after that, its attention was abruptly drawn toward the blood-fiend soul-locking lantern in my hand. Under the reflection of that sinister blood-red glow, the savage-killing intent inside its eyes gradually faded away, replaced instead by something much clearer: fear. The moment I realized this corpse puppet actually possessed self-awareness, my interest was instantly piqued. Originally, I had planned to destroy it immediately since leaving something like this alive would only create future trouble, but now I suddenly had another idea. I lowered my gaze toward the lantern in my hand and pretended to think deeply for a moment before slowly raising two fingers in front of my chest like some ancient immortal master. Then, with an extremely serious expression, I began chanting completely made-up nonsense. Balala energy, heavenly spirit, Om Mani Padme Hum. The moment the fake incantation ended, I quietly guided the yin-attributed spiritual energy inside my body directly into the lantern. At the same time, the corpse puppet seemed to sense a fatal threat approaching. It let out a strange shriek, instantly turned around, and desperately tried to flee back into the hidden trapdoor below the floor. But I merely flicked my wrist lightly and gently shook the blood-fiend soul-locking lantern 3 times. Fueled by my yin spiritual energy, the lantern's crimson light began swaying violently inside the darkness, and under that terrifying blood glow, its true ability finally revealed itself. First, it could guide spirits toward the yellow springs of the underworld, and second, it could summon wandering ghosts to confuse and suppress enemies.